Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and you may have noticed we've had a bit of change of scenery. Everything around me is glowing, so let me know down in the comments if you like this new background as such. So yeah, let's get straight into the video, I guess. So as you may have noticed by the title, today I'm talking about pawn structures, and what I mean by that is how to use pawn structures, how to attack weaknesses in pawn structures, and I've decided to choose a game played during 1970, I think it was, in the USSR versus rest of the world match. If you don't know what that was, I can actually make some videos on it one day, whatever. Let me know in the comments what videos you want me to make. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So it started off in a Grenfell Defense. If you don't know what this is just d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5, and Grenfell is characterized by d5. If you don't play d5 here, you could play e6, and that's called a King's Indian, or if you push this pawn, it's called a Queen's Indian. Yeah, obviously King or Queen depending on which pawn in front of the piece you push. So we played d5 here, going into the Grenfell Defense, and White actually goes for an old line here. It was old during the 1970s, so this sort of tells you how old this line was really. So yeah, he plays bishop g5, and it's not like it's a bad move or anything, it's just not one that has been seen for a while. So what he's trying to do here is just throw off his opponent, something like that, So after bishop g5, black replies with knight e4, obviously just attacking the bishop here. That's not a good arrow. Just attacking the bishop there on g5. So bishop comes back. Bishop h4 is also like an old sideline, so the person playing white here has obviously gone some depth into some prep or something against this opponent. So yeah, after bishop h4, black decides to play c5, and I think the idea behind this is that, as you can see in the center of the board, white has two pawns controlling the center, and so white obviously has more of a central presence than black does. And so the idea of c5 is that black wants to get a pawn in the center to increase his presence in the game, to sort of fight more for equality. So after c5, white takes, and then we have a trade of knights, and we have b takes c3, and now the queen comes down and takes the pawn on d5. And now you might be thinking, well, maybe we just want to take this pawn here on c5. And this game, I'm showing you it from the white side because white wins based off of black's bad pawns. Now if you notice in this position, if we were to take here and the queen takes, white is actually left with this isolated pawn, and I mean, there's not much for it, Usually if you give yourself bad pawns, you usually have some sort of compensation, but here white doesn't have much at all really. So yeah, obviously we don't want to take there, so instead of taking, white plays e3, and now takes, and you might be thinking now as well, well, surely we just take with, bad arrow again, surely we just take with the c pawn. And again, if you want to take the c pawn, I mean, it's not terrible, but the idea behind what white played here, queen takes, is actually much better, because as you can see, it's attacking the queen and the rook. So what it does is it forces a queen trade. Now after the queen trade happens, what you can see has happened is now white has this semi-open and open file that his rooks can come to. He has one piece developed, and he's gotten rid of black's only active piece, which was his queen. And as you can see here, white is putting pressure on this e7 pawn, and black's going to have some trouble castling without dropping the pawn basically. So already white has a superior position out of the opening just by playing these old sidelines. So yeah, so after takes, we have knight c6 just trying to develop, and now we have bishop b5 just obviously pinning the knight to the king. Black breaks the pin, and now knight f3 just developing, preparing to castle. And now black plays e6. Obviously, if you notice, we play bishop g7 here and try to castle, then the pawn on e7 drops. So black plays e6 as a way of safeguarding the pawn, and this is actually black's first concession with his pawns, because as you can see here, his light square bishop is blocked by its own pawn, and as the saying goes, it's biting on granite basically. So yeah, after e6, white castles, and bishop g7 is played. Obviously, black is preparing to castle. We have rook a to b1, just taking control of the semi-open file. And you can probably tell that the game is going to be characterized by these B and C files, because it's where like the base of play is sort of coming from, because it's so open. So black castles, and now knight d2. This may seem a bit of a confusing move because, as the saying goes, knight moves back are sometimes the hardest moves to find. And the idea behind knight d2 is that he one day in the future wants to make his way to c5 here, where he will be pressuring the b7 pawn and the bishop. And so black actually makes his second concession here by playing f5. And he's playing f5 because he wants to control the e4 square to stop the knight from coming to c5, because obviously it would have come to c5 that way. But as you may notice, I mean, we just play knight b3 and it's coming to c5 anyway. So now black plays another concession with his pawns and actually plays b6, and this is just not very good at all, because as you can see before, this knight had an extra layer of protection from this pawn, and now with b6 he's taken away that layer of protection. So now white immediately punishes this with rook f to c1. Obviously if black makes a nothing move like rook f8, we just win the knight here. That's not rook f8, rook e8, sorry. So yeah, obviously black tries to defend, and now we play bishop a6, obviously attacking the rook, trying to get rid of this rook's defense from the knight. So now the rook moves, and now white plays bishop b7. This is a clever move because, as you can notice, if we go back, then the rook just comes back and it's the same position has just been repeated. So the idea behind bishop b7, as you might be able to see, is that now the rook can't use the square to protect the knight. So now obviously the knight is hit twice and it can't be defended, so it has to move. And now black plays knight d8. And as you can see here, all because of these pawn moves, mainly b6 that happened earlier, white now has this fully open file that we can just dominate, basically. And white actually basically ends up winning this game all thanks to this open file. So obviously he takes advantage of the open file and the 7th rank, which, as some of you may know, a rook on the 7th is often a game-winning factor. So obviously white's going to take advantage of it. So after rook to c7, black tries to counter that by playing, sorry, bad arrow again, rook f7, just trying to counteract any sort of attack on this bishop, just defending it. And now white plays bishop to a6. Maybe he wants to reroute his bishop somewhere. I'm not sure. Maybe rook c1, or I mean, if any of you can tell me the idea behind this move, I don't know really. But anyway, after bishop a6, black decides to play bishop to a4, and what he wants to do here is just trade off this knight. And you might be thinking, well, if black didn't want this knight coming to c5, why couldn't he just have made a plan based around trading off the light square bishop for the knight, instead of having to make all these concessions to stop it from getting to the square? And it's obviously an improvement, but anyhow, let's carry on. So now white doubles his rooks on the c file, and now as you can tell, we are just positionally dominating this game. So now black plays bishop to f8. The idea is to come to a3 to try and attack this rook, because he wants to try and disturb the peace that we have between these rooks here. So after bishop f8, white actually plays rook 1 to c4, and the idea is that obviously we're attacking the bishop. It can only come here, or it can take the knight. Well, or black can trade the rooks, obviously. So now after the rooks are traded, black plays knight to c6, getting his knight back into the action, because as you can see it wasn't doing anything on d8 there. So after knight to c6, we have bishop to c4. And as you can tell here, thanks to this concession of f5 that black made earlier, this pawn has been left backwards. And now what white is doing is immediately punishing this by targeting it. And obviously it's not going to be very easy to defend, because although this rook is here, you might be able to see that there's a pin on the king. So maybe in the future we might be able to play some move that exposes the pin and ends up winning the pawn. So after bishop to g7, white actually can win this pawn by force, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to see if you can find it. It's not a very easy move to find, but you might be able to see it. It's sort of like a tactical motif. So if you found it, it's rook to c8, and the idea behind rook to c8 is that after takes, we actually take here. As you can see, we are attacking the king and the rook. So then after rook to f8, we take the rook back. Now, black plays knight b4, just trying to attack the pawn, and obviously if black picks up the pawn, this knight is going to be left without a defender. So now white solves both problems by playing knight to c1, getting out of the bishop's way and defending the pawn in the process. So now we have entered an endgame, and obviously king activity matters in the endgame. And yeah, so the idea behind king f7 here is just to activate his king, because obviously he's a pawn down. But anyway, white actually went on to win this endgame, and if you want to see the rest of the game, I will leave the notation in the description. So yeah, that is basically going to be it. I hope you enjoyed this video. It might be a bit short, so yeah, I'm sorry. Tell me if you want some videos in the future, more about pawns and how to use them or something like that. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you had a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.